We've had the privilege of traveling all over the world with the ministry of Passion Life and teaching in various places, various cultures, but there is really one that stands out in my mind, and that is this mysterious country of Vietnam that lives on in the American cultural awareness of the Vietnam War and the implications. Amazing things have happened in that country where so much suffering has taken place, and we can't wait to tell you what's been going on in the country of Vietnam these last few years. Well, we want to warmly welcome everybody today to Passion Life's video blog. We're happy that you're here, John. I always look forward to being able to have these discussions with you. It's great to see you today.
Good to be with you.
Yeah. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the work that Passion Life has been doing and is enjoying watching God do in the country of Vietnam. That's a country that we haven't talked about very much lately with people. So I thought people might enjoy hearing a little bit about the history of what's going on in Vietnam with Passion Life and our trips there.
If you are my age, I'm 20 years older than you are, okay? But if you're my age, I'm 70 years old now. Yeah. Vietnam has, just the name Vietnam has a specialty to it, okay? I mean, my entire growing up years was watching Vietnam on TV with the Vietnam story. And people just, 2, 3, 4, 5 years older than me were in Vietnam. I graduated from high school in 1973 when everything was coming to a close in Vietnam. But it's part of my DNA as a part of my generation. So Vietnam is very special to us.
Yeah, there was a lot of mystique even for my generation as well, John, because all that happened, it was all wrapping up around the time that I was born. And so it was still very much in the psyche of the American mentality going into my growing up years. People talked about the Vietnam War. People talked about the implications and the fallout of all that stuff. So I think it's actually the next generation after that really has felt more separated from Vietnam in terms of not knowing much about the country from the war and this and that. One of the things I wanted to start off with before we get too deep into this subject is to acknowledge that Vietnam is a communist country. There are not very many communist countries in the world. As far as I know, I think there are only 5 communist countries in the world right now, and Vietnam is one of them. And because of that, we have to have some sort of discretion today, and I want to share with our viewers that we can't just show any old picture or say any old name or locate any old place on a map too definitively just because there are implications for Christianity and the persecution of Christians and the illegality of some sorts of Christian activities within Vietnam. So we do have to be careful in the way we talk today.
Right. Most definitely.
That leaves us unable to use like first and last names and some pictures and things like that. But we'll dance around it a little bit because we've enjoyed going to Vietnam over the years. You and I took our first trip there together. I think it was in November of 2017 was the first time you and I went to Vietnam together.
Yeah. We went to Vietnam because we had received an invitation and a promise that they were going to gather about 75 different pastors and leaders in Hanoi.
That's exactly
and
right.
invited us to come and teach the 4 questions. Now, we got this invitation because what was happening in China had finally spilled out and reached some of these people in Hanoi, Vietnam. And so they said, please come to Vietnam. So I was very excited to go to Vietnam again because of my background. And I remember even driving around in Hanoi and seeing people with the round pointed hats working in the rice fields, all these images that I grew up with, seeing them in color. But we got there and we found out that unbeknownst to us, we were competing against Franklin Graham.
Yeah, that's somebody you don't want to compete against.
No. We were competing for the attention of the pastors in Hanoi at that time because Franklin was planning a big crusade. And,
That's right.
And he had invited all the pastors to come and meet with him. So our 75...
They had a meeting on that very day that we were scheduled to teach the 4 questions.
Yeah, I think our 75 became about 5 pastors and maybe 20 other leaders. I don't think we had more than 25 people. And that's a long way to go at some pretty serious expense. And then you're dealing with some disappointment, and then you kind of got to make your peace with the fact that, okay, the Lord has me here. These are the people that are here. And small beginnings, God does not despise. And so we got into the 4 questions teaching. And then something extraordinarily happened on that first day that I think the ripple effects are still unfolding to this day.
Okay, I think you're right.
Yeah. And that is that there was a pastor there who brought a lady from his church with him who had come to see him the day before. And if I'm getting the story incorrect, you go ahead and correct me if I'm getting the details wrong because you were there with me. But the story is that she came and was told that she needed to have an abortion because of problems with the pregnancy. And she came to the pastor, and the pastor says, I don't know what to say, but I'm going to this thing tomorrow. Why don't you come along with me? So among this small group of 20 to 25 people, there was a young woman who at the break during lunch hour came up to us and told us with her pastor that she was scheduled for an abortion at 2:00 that afternoon.
That very afternoon.
The way you remember it?
That's exactly how I remember it.
Okay.
That's right.
Just for our audience to know, we teach these 4 questions, and the first deal with sort of the biblical foundations of knowing God, what God says about human life and the value of human life in the womb, and how God sees us as human beings, men and women, sons and daughters in the womb. And the second deals with the reality of child sacrifice or the shedding of innocent blood according to the Bible. And then in the afternoon, it becomes more practical. How can we get our past washed away so that we're not hindered by guilt and grief? And how can we start rescuing moms and babies? So we had to basically turn around to the women that were there. And I think we have a picture of us. And we asked this woman to come and sit down. And the women that were there began to lay hands on her and begin to pray. And they became rescuers. They became graduates of the 4 questions after just 2 questions.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And they started to pray with her. And immediately, love taught them what to do. We're going to help you. We're going to walk you through this situation. Now that we know the value of human life, we're going to stick with you. And so it was quite remarkable that this day with just a small group of people, we had our first rescue in Vietnam during our first training session.
That's right. We had rescued our first baby before lunchtime on our first day of teaching, which, it was pretty amazing. That doesn't happen in a lot of places. And better yet, now I think in total I've been to Vietnam 5 different times. I know that you and I have been there together twice. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
I think you and I went there together twice. And the only other time that you went out of those 5 trips that I've made, the only other time that you went was when we were teaching a group of people in a fairly small room. Again, it may have been 30, 35 people in a room. And we taught question 1 and we taught question 2, and we were about to break for lunch when the back door of that training room opened, and in comes this same woman that had been at our training the first time. She had decided to keep her baby. The Christians there had worked with her, and they had invited her to come to the training. She came in at lunchtime with her 7-month-old baby.
Yep.
The one that had been rescued from the abortion at that very first training.
Right.
And just like the first group of pastors, just to see her and to see her transformed life and to see this baby and see the value of it, these guys became graduates of the training after just 2 questions as well. Now, they got questions 3 and 4 after lunch, but they understood it.
Yeah, it was one of those things that you can't you can't plan on. But
That's
when
right.
you go out by faith, you're relying on the fact that God will provide these special authorizing moments for the pastor. So you're teaching them the Word of God, but then it's the testimony that makes it all incarnate, so they can see it, they can feel it, they can hold this baby, they could turn to each other, start nudging each other. You could just see the vision about how their church could become an army of good Samaritans begins to unfold. And it was one of the highlights of the 15 years that we've been doing this work, is to see that this woman come walking in the door with her baby and giving her testimony, basically saying, look at the power that the church has to rescue mothers and babies like me.
We've been around the world and we've taught we've taught the 4 questions in a lot of different scenarios, but that one remains unique in that we got to meet this woman and this baby that was saved just in the very first teaching we ever did there in Vietnam. You can say that it portended well for the future of the pro-life work in Vietnam. Now, the pro-life work there has gone on for several years and has really been one of those places where there's been a special and unique thing that's happened in Vietnam. And it's a little different in every country. Maybe this country, you see a lot of pregnancy help ministry or work rise up. But in Vietnam, kind of the hallmark, if you will, of what's happened in Vietnam is that they took the training very, very seriously, and they began to reproduce the training as though that was what they were supposed to do. They said, we're going to go out and we're going to train this all over the country. And it has not stopped.
That's right. If you remember, Mark, also the leaders in Hanoi, probably because so many flaky ministries and unstable ministries and cults and strange religions had bombarded Vietnam. These leaders took our 4 questions, which is basically, it's a Bible study. And didn't they study them for like 6 months or something like that?
I think they did.
Through every single verse.
A lot of times we encourage people, you don't need to be an expert to teach the 4 questions. Just go out and teach it. It kind of teaches itself. But they did actually kind of just the opposite. They didn't teach it at all for 6 months. They met together on a weekly basis, the leaders did, and they just took it apart, verse by verse, word for word, and they talked about it, and they prayed about it, and they challenged each other over it, and then they really felt like they were ready to go out and teach others.
And when they did that, I mean, that's mature pastoral leadership. Let's guard our people, make sure that we're teaching something that's true. So I salute them for doing their due diligence. But then they organized and they started teaching, and there was mass explosion in terms of the numbers of people that they started to train. You want to add to that?
Well, I just think that that's probably why they saw such great response, is that when they did begin to teach, they were really ready. They really knew what the Word of God said, and they knew how to communicate the concepts very, very fluidly. And the people responded to the Word of God. Yeah, we started getting photographs of trainings from all over, especially the Hanoi area. And then all of a sudden it began to move outside of Hanoi and into the minority groups. And we were getting stories of people who walked overnight or rode motorbikes, for 13 hours to come hear a training. And we were just fascinated by the numbers that they were reaching within a short amount of time.
And they also took it upon themselves to take the 4 questions, which, by the way, you can find on our website, passionlife.org. 10 pages long, very easy, just download it for free. But they took the 4 questions that we had translated into Vietnamese, and they translated them into Hmong, I believe.
That was
so
the
the
first
pictures that we
language.
got, like this one picture of all these women here in these brightly different, dresses. These are not This is not Vietnamese cultural dress. This is Hmong cultural dress. So they became missionaries with the 4 questions right away as
in their
well,
own ethnic minorities. They did, yeah. I remember early on, and it could have only been within a year or two of our first going there. They had written to us that they had made a commitment, or at least a prayer goal, of reaching all 63 provinces of Vietnam with the 4 questions training by a certain amount of time. And then they scrapped that goal very quickly after they made it, and they said, no, that's too small. We need to make it our goal to reach and teach every single church in the country of Vietnam with the 4 questions. That was their new goal. It's kind of amazing to see.
That's some of the qualities of a true movement of God. And is this a good time for me to just mention some of the verses from Psalm 78?
Oh, I think it'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, all right. These are the verses that our own church here in the Atlanta area, Johnson Frey Baptist Church, we've been working our way through Psalm 78. I got to look it up here because my iPad just died here, but let me look it up on my phone.
Very convenient.
Psalm 78 talks about the need to teach and the need to testify. And when I look at what happened in Vietnam and what continues to happen in Vietnam, it's because they indeed got the idea that they were going to teach the word and they were going to bring their testimony forward to their current generation and to the next generation. So here's what Psalm 78 says. God established a testimony in Jacob, and he appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach to their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments. And when I look at Vietnam, I look at a people who have suffered a lot under tremendous hardship, imprisonments for their faith, and even now with limited liberty, but having an earnest desire to be faithful to the call of God. And when they heard what the Bible says about the sanctity of human life, they were zealous to try and start reaching other people and to teach it to other churches, to teach it to their young people, to see that the babies that were not yet born had a chance to be born, and then to hear eventually about how they were rescued from abortion. And we just think of that one little baby that we talked about from that first trip there. She's going to grow up, and she's going to hear the story of how she almost died, how she was rescued, and it's going to have an impact on how much God pursued her and protected her life so that she could know him and know life eternal. And these are the things that I think that God has honored and made it spread throughout the country so much.
Psalm 78 reminds us that these glories are not just for us to hold, they are for us to teach to others and to pass on to the next generation, and let the next generation be prepared to pass it on to the next generation after them. And that is really kind of at the heart of the DNA of the 4 questions training, is that it is designed to be retaught time and time and time again, so that we're making disciples that are making disciples that are making disciples.
That's right. And like you mentioned earlier, we're not making experts. The world does not need more experts. It just needs more good neighbors.
Yes.
People who know how to rush into a problem as a good neighbor, and with a heart of love, let the love teach them what to do to stop the innocent from dying. And when masses of people start to see themselves as rescuers and not deferring to experts, they become a movement. They hear it, they have stories to tell, they tell it, it inspires the next group. They go out and they obey the commandment to rescue. They get their own stories. So it's a teaching of the word and the testimony that just explodes it and is still fanning the fires in this part of the world.
Well, that's a great place to take a break, I think. And when we come back, we'll talk about this movement and how it's ongoing here in Vietnam.
Okay.
The U.S. accounts for only 3% of the abortions that happen in our world each year, leaving 97% of the crisis before us as a world missions challenge. Would you join us in serving where the need is greatest? PassionLife, rescuing the most vulnerable where abortion is most concentrated.
As I travel all over the world, people commonly ask me what they can say and do to help a mother who's in a pregnancy-related crisis. And I always say to them, be ready to speak up and show them the simplest of things. Show them what their baby looks like. We call this the Passion Life Tiny Baby. It's what you look like at 9 weeks of age, and it's available. You can find more information about it on our website.
John, going back to our map here of Vietnam, just so people can get an idea of the way it's positioned in Southeast Asia. It's got 3 countries that border it. You've got Cambodia, Laos, and then to the north, it shares a border with a portion of China.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got Thailand right there, and Myanmar, and up into that area, you're going to have Bhutan, and you're going to have India and Nepal. So it's kind of a strategic area, because it's if you can teach in Vietnam and have it spread, it may or may not also have the ability to spread right into Laos and Cambodia, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Here's something, John, that I'm not sure I really realized until I was doing some research on it. I knew that just like China had a one-child policy to control the population for so long, Vietnam, since 1988, has had a two-child policy. Each family is allowed to have 1 or 2 children and not more. What I did, and I knew that they had that in place, what I did not realize is that it was still in place until this summer. They'd have just abolished the two-child policy in Vietnam. I think it was in June of 2025, they started to encourage more children because, like other places in the world, the birth rate is falling beyond replacement abilities. Yeah. And they're worried about the future of their country.
My thought is, it's amazing that it turns out in a place like Vietnam that the people most oppressed are the people now most in a position to rescue the country.
Yes.
In terms of fertility, okay? Because it's the Christians who now are zealous to produce the good works that God has prepared for them to accomplish in the rescuing and bringing help to mothers and babies, and helping them learn how to trust God for their daily bread, trust God for the forgiveness of their sins in their past, to become part of the church. So it pleases me in the outworking of God's providence that the government in so many countries now recognizes that they need more babies. And by definition, they need people that want to rescue babies.
And by definition, then, they're trying to get back to what the Bible describes as a harmonious society. The Bible has a pattern for a just civil society that thrives and grows, and people can create and pay, create wealth and generate value in society. And one of the ways that they can do that is through children. So it's bringing these governments that are godless back to a realization that the Bible really had a great plan for their country all along, if you will.
Exactly.
Pretty amazing. The government has also taken what they did, these Christians have done, as far as they translated the 4 questions training material. And you can do it one of 2 ways in Vietnam. You can do it underground, and you might get caught, you might get in trouble. Or you can go to the government and give them your training material and let them read through it and decide whether or not they want to put their seal of approval on it. And this is one of the first Christian training, certainly the first pro-life Christian training that has ever gotten government approval to be taught in the country of Vietnam. They went and they did it above board, and the government approved it, which is just astounding.
It's a great breakthrough, and they were so excited and proud of what they had accomplished there in Vietnam. And some other things have gone well there. Not everything has gone well. Okay, you're going to mention some of those, but getting this officially and legally published was a big thing. Starting with a core organizing committee of leaders where they studied and prepared proved to be tremendously valuable. Going over and thinking like missionaries and going into the minority neighborhoods and up into the mountains, that proved to be something that God very much favored and honored. And then sharing the testimonies as they went, so that instead of testimonies from other parts of the world, they became Vietnam testimonies. These are some of the things that went well. And then COVID came along and some other things came along, and the devil gets his play. So what has not gone well?
Yeah, they have had some challenges in Vietnam, and one of the challenges that they have is that the Vietnamese church culture, for some reason, has a very much of a mine yours mentality. There's a protectiveness in, I'm sure not among all of them, but it seems to be pronounced in the Christian culture. And there have been some struggles even within the pro-life group about, hey, well, this is my group over here that I'm training, and I don't want you guys messing with my group. These are my people, and these are my people. And so we want to pray against that. We want to pray against the turnover that they've had. They've had a couple of people get really, really involved and then had something that happened in their life that took them out of the game as far as being a big pro-life leader or whatever. Another thing that has been hard is working from north to south. There seems to be a little bit of a divide, which I don't totally understand, but there seems to be a little divide in culture between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. And that's a challenge that is ongoing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, the church still has its own set of weaknesses wherever it is in the world, and they show up in a movement.
So pray for Vietnam. I guess that's the bottom line. There have been some wonderful things that have happened in Vietnam, and we're really excited about the future of the pro-life work there. But we'll ask you guys, our viewers, to pray with us for Vietnam and continue to pray for that rapid reproduction that we see that's kind of, John so eloquently went over Psalm 78 with us to help us see that that's a godly value. It's part of why it's in the DNA of the 4 questions.
And I would also encourage everybody to stop by PassionLife.org and go to our Vietnam page, because there you can see some other pictures. You can see the data that has driven us to Vietnam in the first place, and why we want to continue to work there, why we welcome your partnership in reaching the hardest places all over the world, and that's certainly going to include bringing the gospel of life to a place like Vietnam.